Hey everybody. So today we're going to be taking a look at how to make a menu system in Godot. I covered this before in my Match 3 tutorial system, but I think it was like, I don't know, probably part 45 or something like that. And I don't think that's super friendly to new viewers. So I figured I'd break this out kind of into its own thing. I'm also doing things slightly differently now than I was before. And I just kind of want to go over exactly how I would create a menu system. Now, the reason why I do this is I like to have something I can use as a starting place for a project, especially if I'm working on something that's just kind of like an experiment, just testing things out to see how it works. It's really nice if I already have that menu system built. So what I'll do is I'll make kind of a template project, and I'll have a few different of these, and this would be one for like maybe a mobile game that I want to have a pretty flexible menu system for. So what you'll be learning today is we'll be talking about how to use Godot's inheritance system to extend components in a flexible and easy to use way. We're also going to be talking a lot about Godot's signal system and using it to trigger events. And this is in addition to also setting up some UI elements. So we'll also be talking about the UI. So let's get into Godot. All right, so here we are in Godot. I made myself a new project. I called it Menu System. I set up a few things really quickly. First of all, I want this to be kind of like a mobile menu system. So keeping that in mind, I want to make sure that I have things set to what a mobile display would be. So my width is 1080, my height is 1920. And because that's too big for the display I'm currently using, my test width is 540 and my test height is 960. And then down here, I have my orientation set to portrait. I have my mode set to 2D so that way it can scale effectively. And I have my aspect set to keep. So it's always going to have this aspect ratio. What will happen with some modern phones is that means that you'll have black bars on the top and the bottom. And you can adjust that by adjusting what you want your resolution to be. Good Lord. So what I want to do here first is kind of jump in and get started. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make let's make this a 2D scene, but I'm going to change that type in just a second. I want to make a basic menu panel. So what I want is a menu system where you start with one panel open, and then like say you press the settings button, I want that panel to go away and another panel to slide in with all the menu stuff. Maybe then you can press back, that'll slide out, another panel will slide in. So it's based on these sliding panels. So in order to do that, I need to have an overall node to contain what a panel would have. And I'm going to do that by creating what's called a canvas layer node. Now, canvas layer node is kind of just a holder node, but it also can detect if you have a camera in the scene. And if you have a camera in the scene, it will always be in the same position on that camera. So I'm going to change this type of this node 2D. I'm going to make it a canvas layer. And I'm going to call this menu panel. This is going to be our default class. Now I already have some folders set up here. I'm going to save this menu panel first before I go any further. So I'm going to save this scene into the SRC folder. And inside here, I'm going to create a folder for, I'm going to call this UI. And then I'll just save this in there. Now this menu panel is going to have a few different things on it. Let me zoom out here. I'm going to want to have maybe like a label to tell me what menu panel I'm on, and then at least 2 buttons. I'm going to go with 2. I don't want to have that third button on there, just in case I want to add the third button, but maybe not have it in some other ones. So I'm going to, with my main menu panel here, I'm going to add a new child node, and there's 3 ways you can do that in Godot. First, you can highlight the node you want to make a child at and press the plus button. You can right click and choose add child node, or you can press Control or Command on a Mac A. And the node I'm going to make here first, make a label. And for this label, I'm going to make it kind of big, and I'm just going to place it manually here first. My text here, I'm going to have be main menu. Now you can't see this text at all in there because this is using the default Godot font. I downloaded a few different fonts from Kenney.nl. I'll include a link to that in the description down below. These fonts are free and open source for you to use in any project, commercial or non-commercial. Now, to set up a new font, you want to go to your custom fonts with your label selected here. And we're going to create a new font. I'm going to create a new dynamic font. And I'm going to go through my settings here. So first, I want to create the font itself. To do that, I'm going to expand this font dropdown. Use new dynamic font data. Oop, no, sorry, that's not what I meant. I'll load the font because I brought the font in. So under my assets folder, I have a folder for fonts, and I just brought one in, which is Kenney blocks. You can see it changed. For my settings, I'm going to make this have a size of some huge, like 72. Let's go even bigger. 144. All right. Space this out a little bit. Cool. Now I want this to be center aligned. I also want to have this be kind of in the center. Now there's a few different ways you can do that. For me, I'm going to use the margin command, and I'm going to set my left margin to 250. I want it to be 250 pixels away from the left, and I want it to be the same number of pixels away from the right-hand side. Now to do that, I could make my right margin 1080 minus 250, which is 830. Now it's centered. Or I could go to my anchor, and currently all my anchors are here. I could set my right anchor to be 1, and you can see how that changes the position of this green thing. But that also moves where my right is in position to that. I'm going to have my right be negative whatever the left was, 250. I want to move this down a bit, so I'm going to put the top at, say, 400. Cool. Now I'm going to relabel or rename this label menu here. I'm going to call it menu name. Now I'm also going to add a button, and I'm just going to use the regular button node. Again, I'm going to expand this a little bit here and text. So my text is going to be play, but I have the same issue I had before. Now I could go through all of that as far as creating a custom font, or if I go back to my previous font here, sorry about that word cut. So where it says resource, I can save this as a resource, and that saves it as a Godot resource, and I can choose where to put it. Since I'm going to consider this to be an asset, I'm going to put it in my assets folder with my fonts, and I'm just going to call this menu text, maybe menu font .tres, and I'll save it there. Now, since I have it saved, when I go to my button now, I can now go to my custom font, and instead of creating a new one, I can load the font from here. Now it has that as well. I'm going to place this button kind of in the center of the screen. I'm going to do the same trick with the margin. I'm going to put the anchor for the right at 1. And let's go with 300 on the left and negative 300 on the right. Okay. There we go. All right, everything's centered. Good. I'm going to make another button here, and I'm actually going to rename this to be button 1, and there's a reason I'm doing that, but for now I'm just going to call it button 1. I'm going to duplicate this, and this one is going to be button 2. This down a bit here, and this is going to be settings. So this is kind of a bigger button. In order to make this fit, I'm going to make my margin significantly smaller. Let's go 50 on the right and say negative 50. I got a little bit of wiggle room there. Let's go 100 and negative 100. It's not too bad. All right, I'm going to save this scene before I go too much further here. Now, the last thing I'm going to add as a child is a Tween Node. Godot's ability to run Tween nodes is one of my favorite parts about it. It's built in, you don't have to download anything. I'm going to call this my slide tween. All right, with all this done, I'm going to need to add a script to our menu panel here. So under script, I'm going to create a new script, and I'm just going to have it be menu panel, and I'm going to create. Now in here, there's a few variables I'm going to assign first of all. The first thing I want to do, all right, sorry about that weird cut again. So what I want to do is make a reference to my tween there. And when I'm referencing a child object in a script, you want to have it be what's called an onReady reference instead of just calling it with a regular reference. The reason you want to use an onReady reference is Godot activates things from the top down. So the parent, which is the menu panel, is going to be activated first, which means the script on that runs first. And if I try to reference something that isn't set up yet, I'm going to have an error. So if I make it an onReady reference, that means it's going to activate that object at the same time. So we're going to call this onReady var move tween. And I'm going to be using typed Godot script here. So I'm going to use the colon to tell it what type it is, and then the equal sign to tell it what it's equal to. So onReady var move tween, and then to assign it, I'm going to use $, and then I can just grab the slide tween. I also want to have a variable about how quickly I want the transition to happen. That's something I want to be able to change from the inspector. So I'm going to make this an export variable. So this is going to be export variable. I'm going to call this transition duration. And by default, I'm going to set this to be 0.5 seconds. I have a tendency to like long variable names. I find it helps me when I'm coming back to projects after a couple weeks and I don't necessarily know what everything does. It helps me understand what things that I wrote do if I have these nice long variable names. Now we're not going to need the process delta function, so I'm just going to get rid of that. I'm going to create two functions that are both going to use that move tween. One is going to be to slide in, the other is to slide out. So call them slide in. Setting these up first, and then my other function is going to be slide out. Now for the slide in function, what I want to do first is I want to set up the tween to move in, and then I want to start the tween. So to set up the tween to move in, what I want to do is move tween dot interpolate property. And there's 7 arguments to this, I think. I think it's 7. It could be 6. You want to tell it what argument or what object you're setting this to. So this is going to be self. What property, and this needs to be in quotations. And the property I want to manipulate is the offset. The offset on a canvas layer node is 2. No, wait. Ah, there it is. Okay. The offset on a canvas layer node is the layer space offset. So I'm going to have my offset start out as 1080, meaning 1080 to the right, so it's off screen. And from there, it's going to move from where it is to being an offset of 0. And the tween's going to take care of animating that mathematically. So I want to take my offset property, and my first position is going to be whatever the current offset is. And the second position is going to be vector 2 because it needs an x and a y offset. I'm just going to put it as 0, 0. I could do vector 2.0, but I'm just going to do that. And then how long I want it to last is going to be that transition duration that I created before. And now these are different kinds of tweens that you can have in your project. You can play around with these, but for now I'm just going to go with back. And then do you want it to ease in, ease out, or do both? I want it to ease out. Ease in means do you want the tween applied at the beginning and not the end? Or it would still be applied at the end, but do you want the main effect of the tween to be at the beginning? Ease out means you want it at the end, and that's where I want it. And then to start the tween, I said I wanted to. I'm just going to do move tween dot start. Pass statement here. Now to do the opposite, I'm going to grab these 4 lines, I'm going to copy them, paste them here, and now instead of going from our current offset, I want to go from vector from 0, 0 because it's already in to 1080 on X. You'll do, yep, all of that's the same. Now, to test that this works, what I can do here first, if I set my menu panel's offset 1080, so it's off the screen, save my scene, and then play scene, you'll see that I have a blank screen. Now, if I keep it the same way and call the slide in function, and then hit play, you can see that it happened right at the beginning. Let me actually change my transition duration a little bit here. Let's make that 1 second. Play. So there we go. Now that back, you can see it kind of overshoots. You can play around with that. I like back. Sign is nice as well. We got our buttons here, but they don't do anything yet. All right, now to make the buttons start to do stuff, before I set that up, I'm going to save this. And this is our base menu panel. Now I set it up as if it were the main menu panel because I wanted the main kind of to see how everything's laid out. I'm going to make 2 inherited scenes from this. My first inherited scene is going to inherit from menu panel. And I'm going to call this the main menu panel. There's not much I'm going to need to change here. Save this scene before I go too much further. I'm going to make another inherited scene from my original, and I want to inherit from menu panel, and I'm going to call this the settings panel. Now, my settings panel, the menu name is obviously going to need to be different, so we'll call that settings. Now this kind of makes it a bit bigger, so I'm going to need to change the margin. Bring my left margin down to 100 and my right margin down to -100. I'm also going to need to add a third button, and I'm going to need to change the text on these buttons. So for my settings panel, I just want to have a music button and a sounds button. Turn like music and sounds on and off. And then I'm going to make another button here. Now I can't just duplicate these because these are inherited buttons, so instead I'm going to add a new child node. And this is going to be a back button, but I'm going to call it button 3. All right. Now for my back button here, I'm just going to expand this a bit, try to get to about where I want it. I'm going to set this up to say back. You can't see the font though because I need to load that resource. So I'm going to load my custom font from my assets, from my fonts, my menu font. And now let's set these up. So for my margin here, I'm just going to make these easy to deal with. So my left and right are both going to be 100 and -100 for all 3 of these. And then I want these to have the same basic height. So let's say that the top of this one is going to be 1600, and we'll make the bottom 1800. So it's 200 pixels tall. I'm going to do something similar for button 2. We'll make this 1300 and 1500. For button 1, 100, -100. Cool. All right, so let's save this panel as well. Settings panel. All right, now, inheritance in Godot goes beyond inheriting one scene from another. You can also inherit scripts. So for my settings panel and for my menu panel, I'm going to clear out the script that is currently attached to them. So we're going to clear. The same thing for my menu panel, my main menu panel, sorry. Clear. And let's save all of these scenes here. Now I'm going to create a new script on both of these. This is going to be a main menu panel script, but this isn't going to inherit from the canvas layer. Instead, I'm going to have this inherit from menu panel. So I have all of that menu panel functionality, but the buttons now get to act differently. So I'm going to create this, and I'm going to do the same for my settings panel. So I'm going to create a new script. It's going to inherit from menu panel. So that slide in, slide out is already built in now to both of these. Now to make the buttons work, I'm going to grab both buttons. So I'm going to start in main menu panel with button 1. I want to grab the pressed condition. So I'm going a bit fast here, sorry. In the inspector panel, I'm going to choose the node tab. I'm going to use the pressed signal. I'm going to connect that to the main menu panel. I'm going to do the same thing with button 2. Press signal, connect, main menu panel. Now in the settings panel script, I'm going to do the same, but I'm going to do it with all 3. So we're going to go pressed, connect, button 2, pressed, connect, button 3, pressed, connect. All right, so now I've got my 2 scripts that both have these 3 different signals, or they accept signals from their buttons. Now in my settings panel here, what I want to do is make up a few signals. I'm going to make up a signal for button 1 pressed, button 2 pressed, and button 3 pressed. So signal, button 1 pressed, signal, button 2 pressed, pressed. Now I could have just had the button 3 be unique to the settings, but just in case you want to have a bit more functionality, it might be good to have all 3 of the buttons be unique to the settings panel. So signal, button 1 pressed, signal, button 2 pressed. So these are signals that our panels are going to be able to emit. Now essentially what I'm going to do is I'm just going to relay the button signals. So the button, when pressed, so say we're on the main menu panel, when the play button is pressed, it's going to emit a signal to its parent, which is this. And then I'm just going to have this relay that signal to whatever scene it's a part of. So the signal kind of propagates up to whatever might be listening. And if nothing's listening, it's fine. So now to make that happen, in my scripts here that I've created, I'm going to emit those signals when the buttons are pressed. So, oh, did I do that? I did do that in the wrong spot. Mr. Taft. So on my menu panel, I want to disconnect. No, I didn't do that here. Yeah, we've got those. Oh, it's my signals. I put my signals in the wrong spot. Good Lord. All right, so I'm going to cut those button 1, button 2 from there and put them here. Let's get rid of these. Now, when button 1 is pressed, I want to emit the signal for button 1 pressed. Grab this whole line here, copy that, and we're going to paste it down here. Only this time it's going to be button 2. Get rid of these passes to clear things up a bit. Want anything to happen in the process delta function, so we can get rid of that. Cool. Now in the settings panel, I'm going to do something similar. So for each of these, I'm going to emit a signal. Button 1 pressed, button 1 pressed. Going to be button 2 pressed. And the last one is going to be button 3 pressed. All right, so, and let's get rid of these pass statements again. All right, there we go. Cool. Now, what I'm going to do next, now that I have these panels created, is I'm going to create a new scene that's separate from the previous scenes. This is going to be a 2D scene, and I'm just going to leave this as a node 2D. I could use a node. I don't need the node 2D information, but I'm just going to leave it node. And I'm going to call this my main menu. So not main menu panel, but main menu. As part of this scene, I'm going to, instead of adding a child node using the plus button, I'm going to use the chain link button to instance another scene. And I want to instance the main menu panel. I also want to instance the settings panel. Now, this main menu itself is going to get another script. Create a new script here. Oh, before I do that, let's save the node. So saving it as main menu, new script, that's better, create. Now what I want to do is make a reference to both of those panels. And again, because they're a child of the object, I want to use an onReady reference. So I'm going to say onReady var, we'll call it main menu, and this is the main menu panel. Call this onReady var settings menu. We'll call this the settings panel. Now on ready, I want the main menu panel to slide in. So main menu dot slide in. Let's make sure that I have that in the menu panel. Yeah, let's get rid of this slide in here. Just going to comment it out for now. Let it pass so that it doesn't freak out. Now if I take a look at my main menu here, you can see that both the panels are off the side, but if I hit play, the main menu one should slide in. Now what I want to happen is if I press settings, I want this one to slide out and the other one to slide in. So I'm going to take my main menu panel, my node, and I'm going to connect my button 1 pressed to my new main menu. I'm also going to connect my button 2 pressed. 2 pressed, connect. I'm going to do all 3 buttons with my settings panel. Button 1, reason button 3 comes before button 2. Oh, it must be alphabetical. Connect. All right, cool. Now, taking a look here, I can now kind of break down what I want things to do. So button 1 press, I'm just going to do a print statement. Starting game. Well, you could replace this with getTree dot load scene, and then whatever scene you want to load. Is it getTree dot load scene? Maybe it's getTree dot set scene. And then if it's button 2, I want main menu dot slide out and settings menu dot slide in. Now on the settings, button 1, I believe, was music, so I'm just going to do a print statement here. We're going to print music button pressed, but I don't want any panels to slide. Button 3 should be the back button, so I'm going to do settings menu dot slide out and main menu dot slide in. And button 2 on the settings menu, I think, is the sounds. So I'm just going to do a quick print statement. Sound button pressed. All right, I'm going to save all of this now. Let's go out of distraction-free mode here. My main menu, and let's test it out, see what I broke. So hit play. Cool. If I hit sounds button pressed. If I hit music, music button pressed, back, play. And there we go. This is a really simple menu system. You can extend this very, very easily by changing what the nodes are. Because Godot has that 2D viewport set up, if I resize this, everything behaves like it's supposed to. So you can have multiple different display sizes that you're porting this to. And yeah. Next, I'm going to talk a little bit about how to create a music menu. That's going to be unique from this, but that's another video that's going to come out soon. Now, if you want, this project is available on my GitHub, and I'll include a link to that in the description. It's also available on my website. I'll include a link to that in the description as well. I have a Patreon, but it's currently on pause due to everything that's going on in the world. So if you want to do a one-time donation, there's 2 ways you can do that. Number 1, you can go to my itch.io page, and when you're downloading one of my assets, you can decide to leave me a tip. Number 2, I have a Ko-Fi link. I think it's supposed to be coffee, but it's spelled, never mind. I have a Ko-Fi link in the description where you can make a one-time donation. It's absolutely not necessary. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more like it, if you hit the like button, that tells the YouTube algorithm you'd like to see more. If you'd like to see more from me, you can subscribe. You can hit the bell icon if you want to know when I post new videos. Share this video to a friend who you think might like it. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching, and have yourselves a great day.